Horse Guards Parade in the heart of London, where the ceremony of Trooping the Colour takes place each summer. But this morning, Remembrance Sunday, a place for veterans to come and assemble before marching through Horse Guards Arch onto Whitehall for the march past. Horse Guards with St James's Park, beyond it the trees turning autumnal yellow, the buildings of government, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, with the Ukrainian flag flying there, the yellow strip you can see in this still morning on the right-hand side there, and the Union flag at the far end. And then Westminster Abbey and the Houses of Parliament to the left, Elizabeth Tower with Big Ben, which at 11 o'clock will sound for the 2 minutes silence to remember the war dead. A slightly misty day, but a fine day, and as Queen Elizabeth herself once said, it's interesting how rarely there's bad weather on Remembrance Sunday. It was 70 years ago that as sovereign she first laid a wreath on behalf of the nation, and did so almost every year subsequently, latterly watching from a balcony though as the Prince of Wales laid a wreath on her behalf. And today he'll be here for the first time in his own right as King, leading the commemoration. And Remembrance Sunday will take its time-honoured form, the armed forces mounting guard around the cenotaph in the so-called hollow square, the infantry fighting formation. The mass bands and the pipers will play the traditional music. The senior officers of the armed forces will be joined by the Prime Minister, up to 7 former Prime Ministers, other politicians, representatives of religious groups, High Commissioners of Commonwealth countries. Royal Navy coming on parade here in Whitehall to take their place in the hollow square. After the laying of wreaths then, there'll be the brief service of remembrance, and then, for many people perhaps the most important part of today, the long march past of thousands of war veterans or members of bereaved families who've been assembling here on Horse Guards. Sophie Rayworth's going to be speaking to some of those here today about their experiences and their memories and why this day remains so important to them.
It's going to be one of the biggest march pasts we have seen for years, and there are huge numbers of public here, crowds who have gathered, queuing since 7 o'clock this morning to take their places here on Whitehall. They've been listening as well to Big Ben chiming again for the first time in almost 5 years, chiming every 15 minutes. A wonderful sound to hear. It's been a really misty morning here in Whitehall, but the sun looks like it could come out. I've stood here year after year, and somehow it always seems to be sunny on Remembrance Sunday. We are going to have thousands of veterans, of course, taking part in this march past, hundreds from the Falklands campaign, and also about 20 who fought in World War II, the youngest of them, 95.
Anniversaries are important to all of us. They highlight key moments in our lives, allow us to focus on them, and memories of war are no exception. As Sophie was saying, the Falklands War is important this year, the 40th anniversary of that war, and more than 500 veterans from the Falklands are going to join the march past. It was April 1982 that Argentinian forces invaded the remote islands in the South Atlantic, part of Britain's overseas territories. And within days, a task force had been sent to recapture the islands and set sail from Britain. We spoke to 3 of those who've come here today and who saw 3 different sides of the conflict. A soldier who fought on the ground with the parachute regiment, a Royal Naval diving officer who served on HMS Ardent and saved his ship from destruction, and a nurse who treated the war casualties aboard HMHS Uganda, the hospital ship that was sent to the Falklands. And every one of those veterans marching past today will have similar vivid memories of their time in the services. The armed forces who form the hollow square around the cenotaph are currently serving members, of course, of the armed forces, drawn from across all services, and many of them, while not veterans, have seen active service in war and conflict. Latterly, of course, Iraq and Afghanistan. And this moment of remembrance is as important to the newest recruit here as it is to the oldest veteran. Sophie Rayworth is with one currently serving soldier, Guardsman Ryan Salmon of the Prince of Wales Company of the Welsh Guards.
Guardsman Salmon, you've only just joined the army, haven't you, a couple of years ago? Your father, before you were born, he fought in the Falklands War. How much did he talk to you about that?
Initially not so much, but after me joining, and he's opened up a bit more about it to me. Told me a few stories, obviously some of them are shocking, but he's opened up a bit more.
What does it mean to you to be here today, the first time you've been here?
It means a lot to me. I mean, there's so many Falklands veterans here. Some of them I've met before, and obviously there's so many more this year, obviously being the 40th anniversary. But it means a lot for them to be here and to witness all of them. So it's special for me.
And your father's not been able to come, has he?
No, he's not here today, but he's watching at home probably. Yeah.
And you're starting out on a path that he trod before you. What does that mean to you to be following in his footsteps?
I mean, it means a lot. I mean, everybody before me, my great-grandfather, both my grandfathers, my father and my uncle both all served in the services, and just to have a little snippet of that in the first few years is, it's a big thing.
Well, I'm sure he is very proud to see you standing here this morning. Thank you very much for talking to us.
The memorial there to the women of the Second World War, all the uniforms, 17 different sorts of uniforms hanging on that column. And down from there, the cenotaph, which was designed to commemorate the dead of the First World War, in which something like 1 million British troops were killed, and it's said over 15 million people died worldwide, if you include all those who fought on both sides and the civilians. Since then, it's become the focus of the commemoration of the dead in the Second World War and the engagement of British troops in wars in Korea and Malaya, in the First Gulf War over the invasion of Kuwait, in the Falklands, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and here at home in the so-called Troubles in Northern Ireland. Young men and women who've paid the price for our failure to resolve conflict. On Remembrance Sunday itself, 16 years ago, the family of Sharon Elliott, a staff sergeant serving with the Intelligence Corps, on Remembrance Sunday they heard the news that she and 3 members of her patrol had been killed by a hidden mine.
Well, I'm joined here in Whitehall by Stefan van Niekerk, who was deployed to Afghanistan in 2009. Listening to Sharon's parents, that's really difficult for so many people today, isn't it?
It is.
People who lost loved ones a long time ago.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think often people forget about the ramifications of war, the price that we pay. And it's not just those who get injured come back, excuse me, but it's the families as well. It often leaves a massive vortex. They have to deal with the same change, and often it could be harder for the families, just as unexpected.
This is the first time you have come here to take part in the March Past. 2009, life-changing moment for you. You were so young and you lost both of your legs. You stepped on an IED, didn't you?
That's right, yeah. So we're on a routine foot patrol, and my section had to hold a position on a small hill to provide cover for another section moving through in the valley beneath us. We cleared the ground as we usually do, and the device was missed. I went to take my position, and my world got turned upside down.
And you were conscious for quite a lot of that, weren't you?
I was conscious throughout the whole event, so I managed to kind of follow it through, which was quite a lot to deal with at the time, quite a lot to take in. But it was, in a way, it was quite a blessing because at least I knew where I was and what was going on, and have some element of being in control.
And what is it like being here today? I mean, that's what strikes me year after year coming here, the camaraderie that people experience and the stories and the comfort that people feel being together.
You know, it's absolutely amazing. You know, this whole atmosphere. I mean, when you see it on TV, it's one thing, but when you come here, it's just a whole different level. And the camaraderie, it just lifts people's spirits. But just getting together again, like the band of brothers, the band of sisters, and everybody's just getting on again, and it just lifts the spirits, remembrance, you know, and it really does make this such a special occasion.
Stefan van Niekerk, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Long lines of veterans there waiting to take part in the march past, and the hollow square now assembled on the left, the lifeguards, under the command of the first woman to commission into the lifeguards, Elizabeth Goodwin. And next to them, number 7 company, the Coldstream Guards, in their blue greatcoats, purple greatcoats. The Royal Air Force, Queen's Colour Squadron, under the command of Squadron Leader Brendan Dunn, whose grandfather was a sergeant in the Irish Guards, and won the Distinguished Conduct Medal for his actions in the Second World War. The King's Colour Squadron. Now, I'm not sure whether it's kept the name Queen or King. Some have kept the name Queens and some have become Kings, with the King becoming monarch. But always there are some units that remain with the name from before. The civilian services there, Royal Fleet Auxiliary, from the police, from the nursing services, the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, Queen Alexandra's Royal Naval Nursing Services there. And the music is about to begin. David Barringer, commanding the Household Division Band, now plays Heart of Oak. These are the bands of Royal Marine Portsmouth, the Household Division, and later we'll hear from the pipes and drums of the 4th Battalion, the Royal Regiment of Scotland, and the band of the Royal Air Force Regiment is playing as well, the Minstrel Boy. after Men of Harlech, the senior drum major Gareth Chambers of the Irish Guards, as the mass bands stand at ease, and the music's now taken up by the pipes and drums of the 4th Battalion, the Royal Regiment of Scotland, and the Skyboat Song. The mass bands now play Isle of Beauty and then David of the White Rock. The words of the poem Oft in the Stilly Night, which is being played now, talks about the friends I've seen around me fall like leaves in wintry weather. And I suspect many people here today will be thinking of Her late Majesty the Queen, who provided always a living link to the Second World War for so many of these Remembrance Sundays, both here in Whitehall and from time to time abroad. It was only 8 weeks ago that Her Majesty's coffin passed this cenotaph, where she herself had been such a constant figure. The pipes and drums will now play Flowers of the Forest, which was part of the service at Westminster Abbey back in 1920 for the Unknown Warrior, and has been played every year since then.
Yes,
16 pipers playing their Flowers of the Forest. And now the mass bands again with Edward Elgar's Enigma variation, Nimrod, the Hunter. As the sound of Nimrod fades away, the music is taken up by Henry Purcell's When I Am Laid in Earth, as we wait now for the arrival of the procession of the clergy and choir who are going to lead the service of remembrance, and the members of the armed forces and the politicians who will come out here, and finally members of the royal family and the king himself for the 2-minute silence, which is now just under 8 minutes away. This is a new processional cross, incidentally, made from Sandringham oak with Welsh daffodils and Irish shamrocks, English rose and Scottish thistles, and 7 silver studs it was made for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. The choir of the chapel's royal, and the priests behind them, the Bishop of London, Dame Sarah Mullally with her crozier. And now the General's procession, the General Officer commanding London District, General Christopher Geeker and his Chief of Staff and aide-de-camp. He is in command of all the personnel on parade here today. And next will come the procession of politicians led by the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party. King's Scouts standing as a guard of honour on the steps of the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, which is where the politicians will emerge. King's Scouts who've reached the highest level of scouting. Solemn melody. Is the music playing now? And we're still waiting for the politicians. Here they come to come out. Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer, Ian Blackford in the kilt, the Scottish National Party, Sir Ed Davey for the Liberal Democrats. Former Prime Ministers, David Cameron, Theresa May, Tony Blair, John Major, Gordon Brown, and members of the Cabinet following on behind. Boris Johnson there on the left, and to his right, Liz Truss, who was briefly Prime Minister. So all the Prime Ministers standing there, Theresa May with the black hat in the middle behind, between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. And now the Chiefs of Staff, the Chief of the Defence Staff, Admiral Sir Tony Radakin, and the representatives of the merchant navy and fishing fleets as well. And they come out and take their position just to this side of the cenotaph, and they're followed by the High Commissioners and ambassadors. So these ambassadors and high commissioners form a three-sided, a square with a cenotaph at the end of it, all three sides, representing so many different countries who, most of them, contributed in one way or another with men, fighting men and support for the war, women in more recent years. And they're followed by representatives of many, many different faiths, 22 in all here today. And now the royal party, led by His Majesty the King, followed by his son, the Prince of Wales. The Princess Royal, and the Duke of Wessex, and on the balcony, the Queen Consort there, and now Big Ben starts the chimes, leading up to the 2 minutes silence at 11 o'clock. last post sounded by the Royal Marine buglers, and preceding that, the King's Troop with their guns signalling the end of the 2-minute silence. And now the King walks forward in his uniform as Field Marshal, but he's CNC of UK Armed Forces. And now a wreath is laid on behalf of the Queen Consort, who's watching from a balcony as a wreath is laid on her behalf. And now the Prince of Wales, in the uniform of a Royal Air Force officer, 7.5 years in military service, working as a search and rescue helicopter pilot. He's followed by the Earl of Wessex, the uniform of an honorary colonel of the Royal Wessex Yeomanry. He's also the Royal Colonel of the 2nd Battalion Rifles under a number of regiments in Canada. Princess Royal is handed her wreath. The uniform Admiral Chief Commandant for Women in the Royal Navy. He's also a general in the Army and Air Chief Marshal in the Royal Air Force. And now Captain Charles Longstaff, who's the Duke of Kent's equerry, lays a wreath on his behalf. He's a colonel of the Scots Guards, the Duke, served many years in the Royal Scots Greys. He's also president of the War Graves Commission on the left there, on the balcony, with Sir Timothy Lawrence, the husband of the Princess Royal. War Graves Commission, which has over 20,000 graveyards to protect in something like 150 countries. So now they stand at ease, and we come to the laying of wreaths, first by the politicians of the United Kingdom, led by the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Sir Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party. Ian Blackford lays his wreath on behalf of the Scottish National Party, which he leads at Westminster, but also on behalf of Plaid Cymru, the Welsh Nationalist Party. Davey, leader of the Liberal Democrats. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, on behalf of the Democratic Unionist Party of Northern Ireland. And now, side by side, the two speakers, one of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, and the other, on the left of your picture, Lord McFall, Lord Speaker of the House of Lords. Now the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, and on his left the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, who lays her wreath on behalf of the intelligence agencies. And now wreaths are laid on behalf of the Crown dependencies and the United Kingdom's overseas territories, including the Chief Minister of Guernsey and Jersey and the Isle of Man, representatives from Anguilla, Bermuda, the British Virgin Islands, the Cayman Islands, the Falkland Islands, Gibraltar, Montserrat, St. Helena, Ascension and Tristan da Cunha, and the Turks and Caicos Islands. The Channel Islands, the only part of the British Isles that were actually occupied by Nazi Germany during the Second World War. Turn next of the High Commissioners. First from Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Ghana, and Malaysia. All those countries which played a crucial part in both world wars. Almost 1 million Australians, in fact, served in the Second World War. And from South Africa, 200,000 people served in World War I. The second group is made up of High Commissioners from Nigeria and Cyprus and Sierra Leone, from Tanzania, from Jamaica, from Trinidad and Tobago, from Uganda, and from Kenya. And is now being noticed in perhaps a way it wasn't in the past. Many African troops who fought in the First World War and in the Second, who were killed, did not have known graves. Their deaths were not marked. But here, today, they're remembered. And now, High Commissioners of Malawi, Malta, GC, Zambia, Gambia, Singapore, Guyana, Botswana, Lesotho, and Barbados. Mauritius, Eswatini, Tonga, Fiji, Bangladesh, the Bahamas, Grenada, Papua New Guinea, the Seychelles, the Commonwealth of Dominica, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And now the last group of High Commissioners from Belize, Antigua and Barbuda, the Maldives, St. Christopher and Nevis, Brunei Darussalam, Namibia, Cameroon, Mozambique and Rwanda, and Gabon, I should say, and Togo. Mozambique was a Portuguese colony invaded German East Africa in World War I after Portugal joined the Allies, and Rwanda, part of German East Africa, fought over by forces from the Belgian Congo, but all now members of the Commonwealth. And after them, the Ambassador of Ireland, Martin Fraser, and the Ambassador of Nepal, Gyan Chandra Acharya, will lay wreaths together. In the First World War, something like 200,000 people from Ireland volunteered, this is before partition, to fight. And the Gurkhas, of course, have for many years been part of the British Army. Way back in 1816, the first commission. Today, over 3,000 of them serve in the British Army. The Chief of the Services, Admiral Sir Tony Radakin, Admiral Sir Ben Key, the First Sea Lord, Chief of the Naval Staff, the Chief of the General Staff, General Sir Patrick Sanders, the Chief of the Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal Sir Mike Wigston. And they're followed by the civilian chiefs, representatives of the Merchant Navy, the Air Transport Auxiliary Association, and the civilian services. Andrew Pascoe for the Merchant Navy and the fishing fleets, Air Commodore John Lumsden for the Air Transport Auxiliary Association, and the Chair of the National Fire Chiefs Council, Mark Hardingham. That ends the formal wreath laying, and the service follows, led by the Bishop of London.
O Almighty God, grant, we beseech thee, that we who here do honour to the memory of those who have died in the service of their country and of the Crown, may be so inspired by the spirit of their love and fortitude that, forgetting all selfish and unworthy motives, we may live only to thy glory and to the service of mankind. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Teach us, good Lord, to serve thee as thou deservest, to give and not to count the cost, to fight and not to heed the wounds, to toil and not to seek for rest, to labour and not to ask for any reward, save that of knowing that we do thy will. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Unto God's gracious mercy and protection we commit you. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you his peace, this day and always. Amen.
Parade is now brought to attention, and the trumpeters of the Royal Air Force will play the rouse. royal party leaves, watched from the balcony by the Queen Consort on the left and the Princess of Wales. And now the clergy leave, and they'll be followed by the politicians as space is made for the great march past, which today will consist of something like 10,000 people who are lined up listening in silence to that service all the way from the cenotaph right up to Trafalgar Square. The choir is followed by the politicians, those serving today, and those former Prime Ministers led by Sir John Major and Sir Tony Blair. Gordon Brown just behind John Major, David Cameron on the left there, Brian Johnson, Boris Johnson, I should have said, and other politicians. So they make their way off Whitehall, and one by one everybody will leave this space so it's clear for the start of the march past in a few moments. So while we wait for that to happen, let's rejoin Sophie Rayworth, who's just beside the Women of the World War II Memorial. Sophie.
Well, 40 years since the Falklands War, there are hundreds of Falklands veterans marching here this morning. I'm joined by two of them, John Bradley and John Sheldon. John Bradley, you served with the Scots Guards. John Sheldon, you were aircrew.
Yes.
You lost two of your best friends, didn't you?
I did. Ben Casey, who was the first one to die in an aircraft crash on the way down to the Falklands, and then Corporal Dot Love, the Royal Marine Air Crewman. He was in the aircraft that crashed just off of HMS Intrepid with all the SAS on board.
And you found it very difficult, didn't you, coming home, because there was your family, whereas your friends...
I did. I met my family at Yeovilton when I got back, and obviously meeting your family and you being able to be there with them when your friends are not coming home and they can't come and visit their family.
And John, you fought at Tumbledown, didn't you, in the Falklands War? What does it mean to be here for you today?
I attend every year to remember not just those killed in the Falklands, but killed in every campaign, war that we've had. You
have a very private hobby, can
Yes.
I call it that?
Yes.
Which is you go round all over Scotland in your own time cleaning graves.
I visit graveyards, and if I see a military grave, I'll clean it. And whereas, if it's needed, I'll re-letter it as well.
And you will travel a long way to do it. Why do you do it? What does it mean to you to do it?
My wife once told me to get a hobby, and I thought, well, I met up with a guy who was a stonemason, and he said, do you want to learn how to clean graves? I said, yeah. Ever since then, I go round graveyards looking for military graves, and I'll give them a clean. When I clean them, I thank them. I will say thanks for your service.
What does it mean to you to be here on the 40th anniversary? I know you've come before, but...
It's because it's 40 years, and I find that looking back, it doesn't seem that long, but you look back and 252 people died, and so 40 years is a significant anniversary, and to come here and honour those people who died it's like John says, it's not just the Falklands, it's all the other conflicts we're in, all the way up to Afghanistan. So the 40th year is pointing it to us.
Gentlemen, thank you both very much for talking to us this morning.
Thank you. Thank you.
The President of the Royal British Legion, General James Bashall, lays the first of the wreaths on behalf of the Royal Legion and goes into place preparing to do that. James Bashall was in the parachute regiment and commanded in Germany and Afghanistan and South Amar and Iraq and Libya, and finally in Home Command based in Aldershot. The next wreath, this giant anchor of poppies, laid by Stanley Keith Ridley, who's National Chairman of the Royal Naval Association, which has over 11,000 members, 250 branches, and does sensible things like providing isolated veterans with an iPad and teaches them how to use the internet. That's the kind of work that goes on behind the scenes. We just hear the formal titles and roles here, but all these charities that are represented have their own particular way of trying to help veterans of war. The Army Benevolent Fund is the next wreath laid by General Sir James Everard, who was commissioned into the 17th and 21st Lancers back in 1983. He served in Bosnia and Germany and Iraq. And this is the national charity supporting 60,000 people in 63 countries around the world, helping people to adapt to civilian life. The Royal Air Force Association has a wreath laid on its behalf by Air Vice Marshal Nigel Bairstow. It has a 90-year history, the Royal Air Force Association, one of the oldest of the military charities supporting RAF community. They run 4 retirement complexes, allowing 150 or so veterans to live independently with someone to give them a helping hand if they need it. And then the next wreath is laid on behalf of the Royal Commonwealth Ex-Services League, which was actually founded in Cape Town in South Africa in 1921 as a link for ex-service organisations throughout the Commonwealth. After World War I, large numbers of, there were 3 million Commonwealth soldiers fighting, of which nearly 500,000 were casualties needing help. And Colonel Mike Winnerick lays that wreath. The Royal British Legion Scotland has its wreath laid by Lieutenant Commander Martin Hawthorne, who is the national chairman of the Legion in Scotland, a former instructor officer himself in the Royal Navy. The wreath laid on behalf of Transport for London, as it's now called, but actually this goes back to 1920 when George V, as king, said that London bus drivers should parade at the cenotaph on Remembrance Sunday in recognition of the many men who actually drove buses to the front line in France. 1,500 transport workers dying in World War I. So Michael Ellis lays that wreath. So those British Legion wreaths laid at the foot of the cenotaph, and soon the march past to the veterans itself will begin, spanning generations, bringing together people from all parts of the United Kingdom, the Commonwealth, the wider world, who share just this one thing in common, that they fought in war, or are here to remember those who did. A dwindling number of veterans from World War II, inevitably, but some still determined to come here, whatever the difficulty. Brian Latham, who's travelled from Llandudno to be here today, is 98 years old, and he served in the glider pilot regiment, whose job was simply terrifying, to land troops by glider right into the centre of the battlefield.
Extraordinary stories. Well, one thing the veterans say year after year that they really do appreciate is the public, the crowds that turn out every year and line Whitehall. There are about 10,000 people here today, and RAF, I know you met your husband in the RAF, you're here to see your mother marching in the RAF, and two young ladies here, Charlotte and Helen. Your dad is marching, isn't he, for the second time? You've come for your first time?
Yes.
What's it like?
It's definitely an experience, very proud of him, and it's really nice to be here and see lots of different people and different experiences.
And have you had to wait a long time to get here? Because people make a huge effort, don't they, to come?
Yeah, no, we were here at 8:30 this morning, so it wasn't too bad for us. We actually stayed in London last night, overnight, and so we sort of made a night of it last night as well. So 8:30 this morning we were sat here to get the front barrier.
And the atmosphere is amazing,
Amazing,
isn't it?
yeah. The actual 2-minute silence, loved it. It was lovely. Just being part of it in the real.
Well, we're about to see it start, so thank you both very much for talking to us.
Thank you. Thank you, Sophie.
The columns waiting to march off, and the bands, first of all, having to leave the hollow square and leave space for these great columns to come past. As the march past goes on, the bands of the Foot Guards and the Royal Marines and the Royal Air Force are going to play alternately. You may recognise sometimes the tunes coming through and humming to them, the songs from the Great War. They'll always be in England, they play Colonel Bogey. It's a kind of cheerful music that they put on as these veterans, some of them on foot, some of them in wheelchairs, led today by the 16th, 5th, the Queen's Royal Lancers there waiting. It's the centenary of their formation. Sixteenth, 5th Queen's Royal Lancers, and behind them the 17th, 21st, the so-called Death of Glory boys, who have a skull representing death and the words "or glory" underneath. Now each of these contingents will have a wreath layer and a leader, And the reef layer passes the reef to these officers standing beside the cenotaph, who'll take the reef and place it at the bottom until there's a great garden of reeds around the cenotaph. The 17th, 21st Lancers, incidentally, which Winston Churchill as a 23-year-old joined, and Douglas Hay as well. The Royal Lancers, Queen Elizabeth's own, the Lifeguards Association, the senior regiment in the British Army that was formed back in the 1650s. I don't want to give the impression this is a military parade. This is not a military parade. As you'll see as it goes on, the people taking part in it are here because they fought together. The Blues and Royals Association there, formed by the amalgamation of the Royal Horse Guards and the 1st Royal Dragoons to armoured reconnaissance work. And behind them, the 3rd Regiment of the Royal Horse Artillery, past and present members. But when I say this is not a military parade, as this march past goes on, it's actually people who fought together. It's not set up by the Army or the Navy or the Air Force. It's people who fought together, and discover as it goes on groups of people who happen to be in a particular theatre of war or have a particular skill, and who know each other, and who are here to remember what they've done. The Reconnaissance Corps here, Intelligence and Combat Force, for instance, formed in 1941, and were responsible for telling the RAF and Bomber Command what was going on in the air. And many veterans have died in the pandemic. They're represented often by their children here. It's a long way to Tipperary. I said there'd be this kind of music played, and there it goes. The Royal Engineers, the sappers, whose slogan is ubique, meaning everywhere. They were based on the sappers who dug trenches in the First World War so that mines could be laid. Behind them, the airborne engineers, made up of members of the Corps of Royal Engineers. Behind them, the Bomb Disposal Association, dating back to the Blitz in 1940, when they had to cope, of course, with the results of bombs being dropped, the first in Orkney in October 1939. The Army Air Corps Association. The King himself and the Prince of Wales, Duke of Sussex, all qualified as Army Air Corps pilots. It's the combat arm of the British Army. The Royal Logistic Corps, made up of everything that supports the Army. It includes transport, ordnance, catering, pioneers, and even the Postal and Courier branch, the Royal Logistic Corps Association. Really keeps the Army going. Of their members here today on parade. One Chelsea pensioner marching there among that group, meaning that he has given up his army pension to live in the Royal Hospital Chelsea, with other members retired from the armed services. The Royal Pioneer Corps, which were a huge part of the army at the end of the Second World War. In fact, I think it was said that 1 in 6 soldiers was a pioneer, doing all the armed labour, laying the Pluto fuel line, and guarding prisoners and moving stores. The all-important Pay Corps behind them, the ammunition technicians here responsible for the safety of explosives and ordnance. The Physical Training Corps of the Army. They were given the title Royal in their 150th year. Among them were Falklands veteran of the 3rd Battalion Parachute Brigade. The Women's Royal Army Corps Association, laying wreaths on behalf of the Land Army and the Timber Corps, the ATS or the ATS, which the late Queen served in as a 16-year-old during the Second World War. The Glider Pilot Regiment, and Brian Latham there, who we heard from in the film a moment ago, who landed a glider during those operations, Pegasus Bridge and Market Garden, and Operation Varsity in 1944 and 5 with the crossing of the Rhine. You must be thrilled to be here today. The British Limbless Ex-Servicemen's Association, BLESMA. It's their 90th anniversary. And the Royal Hospital, Chelsea, as both men and women have retired from the services and live out their lives, having given up their pension and living in a way in a military lifestyle. It's run like a very benign barracks, and has, as you can see, women members as well as men now. Carol Knight, who was in the Women's Royal Army Corps, she became a pensioner in 2021.
I'm here with Liz McConaughey, who is here taking part in the March Past for the first time. You served in the RAF. You're marching with MERT, the Medical Emergency Response Team.
Yeah,
because
right.
You were flying the Chinook helicopters, weren't you, with some of the most seriously injured. You wanted to come last year. Why didn't you?
So about 4 days before the parade last year, I just had an overwhelming feeling of emotion and sort of PTSD caught up with me and anxiety and pulled out. And it's a bucket list I've always wanted to do and just couldn't find myself to come last year. So it's really nice to be here this year.
You did an amazing number of tours. You served in Afghanistan 10 tours, didn't you?
So I did 10 op herrics throughout my career, all in the Chinook fleet, and we would deploy for 3 months at a time. So we went every year from 2005 onwards.
And you were rescuing some of the most seriously injured. It must have been very, very harrowing work for you.
Yeah, I mean, I always refer to it as the highs and the lows of my career because it was some of the best, the biggest privilege of my career, being able to fly on the Mert. But it was also, saw some pretty traumatic things when we were doing it. So it's really good to be here today.
Who do you think of on this day?
So I think today is really, from my point of view, about the collective loss that the Chinook fleet kind of witnessed when we were out in Herrick, because we saw every single soldier injured or paid the ultimate price come off the battlefield. So for me, it's that collective number of injured soldiers, and that's always what my thoughts go to.
And here you are for the first time. I mean, the camaraderie, the applause, the support for veterans like you is wonderful, isn't it?
It is amazing, and I'm so glad I made it this year. And I think there's going to be so many veterans watching at home who, a bit like me last year, couldn't bring themselves to be here and couldn't leave the safety of their own homes. And I think it's really important, if you can go out and kind of join in on a day like today, it's really important.
I'm going to let you go and take part in the March Past. Liz McConaughey, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Women's Royal Air Force Association in their tartan kilts. Their job maintaining aircraft and motor vehicles and dealing with meteorology and radar and communications and codes and ciphers and all the rest. Of course, now they serve in every arm of the Royal Air Force as pilots, navigators, whatever, but back in World War II, women's roles were restricted. The RAF Linguists Association, involved in military signals intelligence and speaking every language you could think of, Russian and Polish and German and Czech and Spanish and French and Chinese and Arabic and Pashto and Farsi. The Linguists Association formed in 1990 as an organization, a specialist group with special abilities. The Air Sea Rescue and Marine craft with their roll neck sweaters, which they wore as standard while at sea, whose job was to rescue pilots when planes ditched in the Channel or the North Sea. They thought to have rescued something like 13,000 aircrew and civilians. Followed by the Royal Air Force Movements Association, which are responsible for all the things that in civilian life is done at an air terminal, moving freight and loading the planes and all the rest of it. And very much involved they were in the evacuation from Afghanistan. The Royal Observer Corps Association, the job was to report the movement of hostile and friendly aircraft, and invaluable during the Battle of Britain, tracking German aircraft coming over Britain, which was when they were given the title that's much coveted by these various parts of the armed services of being called Royal, the Royal Observer Corps. They stood down in 1995. The loadmasters who worked with the huge Chinook helicopter led by a veteran of the Falklands War. Their job involving everything to do with delivery of equipment and weapons to the front and the repatriation of people injured. They worked very closely with the aeromedical teams in Afghanistan. parachute jumping instructors here, the Canopy Club Association, who taught parachute jumping, and their members on parade here today have fought in the Falklands and in the Gulf and in Iraq, done over 25,000 jumps between them. The Royal Air Force Association Armourers branch is led by Jeff Ashmore, who's actually wearing his father's medals, I think probably on his right chest. And the wreath carried by a Falklands veteran who is mentioned in dispatches. They're followed by the Apprentice and Boy Entrance Associations of the Federation of the Royal Air Force. Apprenticeships which brought 15-year-olds into training, many decorated for gallantry in the Second World War, many killed in bomber command. They included Sir Frank Whittle, who pioneered the modern jet engine, and also included Cliff Mitchellmore. Some of you may remember from earlier years of the BBC, he was an apprentice. Airfield construction, which is obviously a key job of repairing, extending runways, and Jim Stoner, one of those on parade here today, 96-year-old, actually came across from Australia to be here. Construction branch, one of the largest units in the Royal Air Force. The 31 Squadron Association. The scarves of the South Atlantic Medal, by the way, the blue, green and white, the same colour as the South Atlantic Medal, and many veterans of the Falklands have these knitted scarves that they wear as well. The Squadron Association, first time they are marching here at the Cenotaph. They were the last to leave Afghanistan. South Atlantic Medal Association, everyone who fought in the Falklands War on this 40th anniversary, proudly wearing these scarves. The Commando Veterans Association with the Green Beret. Commander's beret, of course, one of the most sought-after berets in the three services. Originally fought in the Boer War. That was gave the British the idea of having commandos, because the Boers had commandos who did the most dangerous and daring jobs, and the idea was adopted way back over 100 years ago. War Widows Association, led by Janet Fuchs, their president, Baroness Fuchs. And their role is to try and improve conditions for war widows and widowers. They laid a wreath on a Saturday because originally they weren't allowed to march here on the Sunday of Remembrance Sunday. Their wreaths would be taken away for some extraordinary reason. But now they are allowed to take part, but they don't carry a wreath. They lay that on the Saturday. Strange story. The British Nuclear Test Veterans Association. Veterans being remembered by the families of those who died from the effects of nuclear testing. Behind them, King's bodyguard of the Yeomen of the Guard. Not in ceremonial dress here, the oldest of the royal bodyguards they are. They're now the King's body, they were the Queen's body of the Yeomen of the Guard. The oldest of the royal bodyguards, created by Henry VII way back in 1485, after the Battle of Bosworth. They still, in their uniforms, do that search of the House of Commons before the state opening of Parliament. They're made up, incidentally, of former serving officers or serving men who've had a clean record and after 22 years service in the services can apply to join. This is Fighting with Pride, an organization that was founded in 2020 to represent those who were forcibly dismissed from the services because they were part of the LGBT plus community, and one way or another, because of their sexuality, were thrown out of the services, which no longer happens. And they march to allow veterans of that dismissal to appear here along with everybody else, fighting with pride. I am not, of course, identifying everybody who's on parade here. There are far too many contingents, but I'm just hoping to give you a hint of the kind of makeup of it. I mean, the main point here is not who they are or where they come from, but actually that they are here and they've chosen to come to remember the service they or their families gave in war. When they march past the cenotaph, they come back round for a salute which is taken this year by the Earl of Wessex, who has with him on his right there the Secretary of Defence, Ben Wallace, talking there, and the National President of the British Legion, Charles Byrne. So this is a march past not just of the cenotaph itself and the laying of the wreath, but a proper march past a member of the royal family on horse guards afterwards. Casevac has about 200 members, casualty evacuation for those seriously wounded in combat, as you can see. Very touching sight of amazing courage and recovery. It includes amputees and double amputees and even a triple amputee with blast injuries in Afghanistan. Followed by the medical emergency response team. That's a team of medical professionals who flew during the Afghanistan conflict on Chinooks with Liz McConaughey there, just on the right, who Sophie was talking to a moment ago. probably recognise this song. I won't sing the lyrics to you, but I'm sure you know them well. Metropolitan Police Armed Forces Veterans Association. Then the Trucial Omen Scouts with their red and white headdresses, who fought with the United Arab Emirates during the 60s and early 70s. The band of the Grenadier Guards there were leading the next group in the parade, and the blind veterans here, founded in 1915 to support the many, many people who lost their sight in that war. Among those marching, Terry Bullingham, who was hit by a cannon shell from a Mirage jet, left him completely blind, and Margaret Wilson, who's 99, the oldest blind veteran marching this year. The Merchant Navy Association, with their huge white anchor, Viv Foster, their national president. It represents over 50,000 merchant seafarers who died, and it's impossible to underestimate the importance of the Merchant Navy, particularly in the Second World War, when supplies to Britain were coming across the Atlantic. And again, they served in the Falklands, the Atlantic Conveyor, which was a tanker converted to a helicopter and airplane carrier, and which was sunk. But the Merchant Navy, who have their own red duster hanging on the cenotaph on the other side, you can't see it from this side, the only non-service organisation to be represented by its flag at the cenotaph. Here is the HMS Argonaut Association, again remembering the 40th anniversary of the Falklands War. The Argonaut was attacked, received 2 direct hits, which mercifully failed to explode, but not before killing 2 members of the crew. HMS Andromeda, also during the Falklands conflict, had 6 members here, wearing those scarves again, the medal ribbon colours of blue and white and green.
Well, the veterans are all returning here to Horse Guards Parade now, and an amazing atmosphere. Huge rounds of applause for all of them as they come back. I'm joined by Stephen Henry, who you served the Royal Logistics Corps. You've only just left the Army, haven't you, this year? And this is your first time marching as a veteran. It is quite an extraordinary atmosphere, isn't it?
It really is an extraordinary atmosphere, Sophie. You can't really gauge the camaraderie down on the parade as we were about to step off, and some of the stories being told and the laughs being had. And as you said yourself, the public out applauding us as we march by, it's an absolutely amazing day.
For a lot of people, they don't actually talk about what has happened to them in the past, except for on days like this, surrounded by people who really understand what they've been through.
Well, that's right. You're with your comrades, you're with your brothers and sisters, people that you've shared things with, things that perhaps civilians wouldn't understand and wouldn't appreciate. So on days like this, the people reminisce with fond and sad memories about some of the friends and colleagues that we've all lost along the way. And you wouldn't get that anywhere else.
And during the 2-minute silence, who did you think of today?
I thought of one person in particular who was my Sergeant Major, Charlie Henry Wood, who was unfortunately killed in Afghanistan. He was a fantastic man. He was a really good friend, and he took us out to Afghanistan. Unfortunately, he didn't come back. But every year I think of him. I think of his wife Heather, who came down here a few times in his memory. So that's who I was thinking of today. But again, there's hundreds and thousands of stories all across the parade from many, many people today, all thinking about those special people that they lost.
You set up a group whilst you were in the army, the multicultural group, didn't you? Why was that so important to you?
It was important to me to give people, soldiers, a voice, particularly from the black ethnic and black Asian minority ethnic communities. And we established that many, many years ago now. They've gone on to great things, and certainly since the 6 months which I've left the army, they're still doing really, really great work, and it's a legacy that I'm extraordinarily proud of.
Stephen Henry, thank you very much for talking to us this morning.
Thank you.
Back in the March past, the Frizguard Association, artificers who carried out basic training to a point in Cornwall, among them the Falklands veteran Jim Knight, who was Chief Petty Officer on the submarine HMS Splendid. Scarves glimpsed of the Falklands operation there on the right. This is the Royal Navy Safety Equipment Survival Association, trained in escape procedures from aircraft that have ditched. And they also were responsible for packing parachutes, making sure life rafts work, all that kind of thing. Fleet Air Arm Officers Association. The Aircraft Handlers Association, branch of the Royal Navy responsible for flight deck operations on board aircraft carriers. And now a change, we come to the Army. And this is the Prince of Wales Royal Regiment, who interestingly have this is actually the Queen's Own Highlanders. Before them there was the Princess of Wales Royal Regiment, which is curious because its Colonel-in-Chief is Queen Margaret of Denmark, and they actually were marching with a contingent of Danish Lifeguards Association to represent the Danish interests. Queen's Own Highlanders Regimental Association. Among them, Company Sergeant Major Albert Doufus, who has 3 generations of his family, 14 members of his family have served in the Highlanders. The Scots Guard Association, a regiment which was formed as part of the personal guard for Charles I, and as such is one of the oldest regiments in the British Army. It played a key role in the Battle of Waterloo, and then served World War I and II. And John Bradley is there, who spoke to Sophie earlier, served in the Falklands and Iraq and Afghanistan, and were in the Battle of Mount Tumbledown during the Falklands. The Royal Scots Regiment, founded by Charles I again in 1633, and played a prominent role in World War I and II. Many regimental associations now going through, wearing the Glengarry with the red and white dicing on it, and the largest cap badge in the British Army, the Regimental Association of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders. Nearly 10,000 of them were killed in the 2 World Wars. And the salute still going on Horse Guards, the Earl of Wessex. It seems a fairly informal kind of salute, this, smiling jovially and the others around them. Just acknowledging the distance these people have come and the part they've played. He's obviously having an equerry down below race reading it for him, so he knows who it is that's going past. The Fusiliers Association, with their red and white hackle there. The Green Howards Association. The Green Howards have a strong link with Norway and the royal family there, and among those marching today, 100-year-old Bernard Madden, who served in the 2nd Battalion in Burma. Some of them wearing the khaki beret of the Green Howards. They were a separate infantry regiment for over 300 years, and then they were amalgamated in 2006 with 2 other Yorkshire infantry regiments to form the Yorkshire Regiment. So the Green Howards is their old name, and of course they keep the memory alive by marching together. The red and white hackles of the Fusiliers Association going through there, followed by the Royal Northumberland Fusiliers. The Gurkha Brigade Association, they were engaged in Goose Green during the Falklands War, but they've been serving the British Crown for over 205 years, since 1815. They've won 26 Victoria Crosses, and they're selected from young men in the hills of Nepal. And something like 25,000 young people apply each year for just over 200 places, much sought after, and much respected force. They also mount guard at Buckingham Palace and at St James's Palace. And many of them live in retirement in Hampshire. They've been having difficulties getting their rights established. They now do, I think, have them well established. At Farnborough in Hampshire. The Green Jackets, motto swift and bold, which they won when they fought with General Wolfe at Quebec in 1759. And they had this green jacket as a kind of camouflage originally, as opposed to wearing red tunics, which the British infantry wore, which of course made them an easy target for sharpshooters. So they chose to wear this rather dark green, and that became their name, the Green Jackets. 59 Victoria Crosses won by them. They've on parade here people who fought in every conceivable battlefield from Borneo down to Iraq and Afghanistan. The Royal Ulster Constabulary George Cross Association. It's the centenary of their founding in 1922. 300 members of the Royal Ulster Constabulary were killed during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. The oldest member on parade is 83, and he's here paying tribute to his son, who was killed in Armagh in 1989. The IUC was awarded the George Cross in recognition of the collective bravery of the force, rather like Malta was awarded the George Cross in the Second World War for its courage in resisting German bombardment.
Well, I'm here on Horse Guards Parade with Gina Alsop, who served with the Royal Signal Corps and has just marched for the first time with SAFA. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thanks for having me.
You have seen another side of war, haven't you, through your work? I mean, you have worked all over the world, Bosnia, Kosovo, East Timor, Albania, but you've been working with refugees, haven't you?
Yeah, so when I was involved in the Kosovo crisis, I actually ended up getting moved to Albania, where we helped set up a refugee camp, and it was quite an emotional time, quite stark realisation to what conflicts actually mean, because you saw the impact to the civilian population, and it was just amazing to be able to be involved and doing something a bit more than normal Royal Signals do. And we actually worked alongside them, helping set up, everything from hearts and minds, football matches between the army and the refugees, who actually totally annihilated us because they had some Kosovo national side on to go into sing songs and
now
people.
Your focus is on the young, isn't it? Because you're now focusing very much on the cadets, the young people, inspiring a new generation. How important is it that remembrance is really for the young people as well?
Yeah, so with remembrance, I think sometimes there's a bit of a disconnect because we think First and Second World War. So it's really important to get the message out to the young, and the cadets have got such a big role to play. They're out collecting money for the poppy appeal, and they do all the regular parades around the country, and it's just really important to let them know that people still serve, and they're still out there serving for our freedom today.
Gina Alsop, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you.
First Aid Nursing Yeomanry, the oldest and most highly decorated uniformed women's organisation in the United Kingdom. Nurses and ambulance drivers in Flanders and France, earning medals, 4,000 serving as agents and drivers and coders in World War II, 12 dying in concentration camps, and today a corps of 150 trained female volunteers from all kinds of backgrounds ready to respond and train volunteers throughout the year. They're followed by St. John Ambulance, 100th anniversary of their cadets, familiar. Sir Oswald Stoll Foundation. This is a home in Fulham and based in Fulham. 250 supported and adapted homes. It goes back to a foundation in 1916 to provide help for injured ex-service personnel coming back from World War I. The Sea Cadets, SCC, the oldest apparently uniformed youth organisation that is, in the United Kingdom. It was formed in 1854, and this year the cadets are from the southwest of England, and they're followed by the Army Cadet Force. They come from Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. They've got 1,000 cadets there, but there are many hundreds of cadets in the Sea Cadets and the Armed Cadet Force and the RAF Air Cadet Force in schools and colleges around the country, and then the Combined Cadet Force as well. They come today from Newcastle. Hold up on the parade ground as these last contingents go through. Mainly now at the back end, the young people waiting to go through, but they're the Salvation Army, the Royal National Lifeboat Institute, civilians killed by enemy action, Antediluvian Order of Buffaloes, the Circuit of Service Lodges, the Munitions Workers, St. Andrews, the British Red Cross. They've all been passing the cenotaph and leaving their wreaths. Combined Cadet Force, and they'll be followed by the Commissionaires Corps, the Coast Guard Association, St. John Ambulance, Fire Cadets, the Jewish Lads and Girls Brigade, the Scout Association, Girl Guides, Church Lads, the Church Girls Brigade, and at the very end of the procession, the YMCA of 18 members. So as the final contingents go through, we come to the end of this commemoration of Remembrance Sunday, which was named to commemorate the moment when, in those evocative words, the guns fell silent on the Western Front, the armistice that marked the end of the First World War. There was a sigh of relief tempered by overwhelming grief at the carnage of 4 years of war. The words, "the glorious dead," were carved on the cenotaph. But in reality, the words, "lest we forget," were more often inscribed on war memorials in towns and villages across the country, lest we forget. And there wasn't much chance of forgetting, because within 20 years, Europe was back at war. And now this year, nearly 80 years later, angry guns are again heard in Europe, across Ukraine. Little chance of forgetting the horror of war. a message that the thousands who came here today to march past this cenotaph in London and to lay their wreaths at its foot want everyone to remember and to understand. From Whitehall, goodbye.